up to 11b1, Yud Aleph Amid Beis, the parent base. Misha Hapach as his Esav. Somebody turned over his olives in order to breastfeed, which means the process has begun. Okay? And then what happened? The Eru Evel. And then a period of mourning fell upon him. One of the 7 things, a father, a mother, a sister, a brother, a mother, okay, etc., fell upon him. So now here's the thing, and this is important, everybody. We all know about Avelus. In fact, Avelus is actually a very much a moving target. It doesn't quite exist the way we think it exists. If I can have a latte, please. Thank you. Minat Torah. Maybe you're right. Only the day that the person passes away and the body is not yet buried, according to some, it's only if the body is laying in front of you, in fact. By the time you get to the first night, even if the body is not buried, but certainly it is buried, you're already out of Avelus Minat Torah. It's a Gemara in Masechtas Zevachim, Daf Kuf, very famous Gemara. Because we learn it from Aaron HaKohen, whose sons died, other than Avihu, in the fire that they weren't supposed to bring. And what happened over there informs us what to do. Came along the Rabbanan, rabbinically speaking, and that's where we hold, not everybody, but rabbinic holds, that the 7 days are all rabbinical in nature. The 7 days are rabbinical in nature. Hi, Daddy. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Hello, Daddy.
Yeah, I just came out from the shear. Where are you?
All right. But Daddy, you got to drive. We just got started, so just come.
Where are you? By
yeah, we have a chair.
Luxembourg?
Yeah, come.
Okay.
All right, come.
Okay.
All right, we just started. Okay, we'll see you in a couple of minutes. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Bye.
Okay.
You told Richie what happened. I told the rabbi he's already waiting. So, new things are coming from you. Yeah, we're just much bigger. I did that once already. That was enough. So, we love you. So I don't want to say you conned me, but you said, Jeff, you want to do? I go, okay, whatever.
It's true. I did that. I did. So, anyways, and you did my job. I think it turned out good. Anticipation is always worse than reality. That's exactly. So then, the short and long of it is, so now, he turned over his olive. What happened? It doesn't even have to be chalamayit. He turned over his olive. Thank you so much. No? Okay. That's okay. So, all right. No biggie. That's it. No biggie. If this is all that happens to me today, I'm doing good. Here we go. See, now it looks good, even perfect. Here we go. I'm gonna move it over here. Oh, that's why. You know what? Don't worry about it. There we go. Took the wrong place. Okay, 1 second. This case. Cut up. I'm just killing time before my father gets here, in case you guys haven't figured that out already. Okay, anyways. No. Here we go. A little boost. Exactly. It's too early.
Wait for a second. You said, yeah, this is Tosh that said Mishana and Teva. But when I started Daf Yomi.
Good morning, Mrs. Campbell.
When I started Daf Yomi many years ago, my Yeshua was Reb David Cohen, Shvigason, and we were learning Nida, and it came up the topic of it says 7-month-old baby lives, an 8-month baby doesn't, and an 9-month does. He said, we see today an 8-month baby does. But it was Gemara says it doesn't. It says Nishtana Teva.
Let me tell you something. So since we're on that subject, we're killing time here. Just for a minute. No, but this is the thing. We have a mistaken idea because of who says something and how it's described. But if you look at it another way, remember we talked about the years that the Gemara and Rosh Hashanah said the gracious Bara Elohim, the first day of creation was on the 25th of Elul or the 25th of Adar, but we don't start counting time until the day we were created, either the first of Tishrei and the first of Nisan. So how long are the first 5 3/4 days? The answer is we don't know. And the Gemara takes it for granted we don't know. Because the Gemara says that's not our time. That's universe time. And so, in fact, time as we know it, the 24-hour day, if you remember, wasn't created until day 4. And the clock didn't tick until man was created. So, in fact, theoretically, it could be 13 billion years. It doesn't affect us whatsoever because our time only starts when we arrive, right? The Gemara took it as a double question. The Ramban talks about Hilui, the first Ramban in the Torah. And he says, and these are his words, obvious and simple, that God created a small particle, so small you could barely see it, but packed with all the energy, and boom, a big bang, and everything was created, and after that, God just simply was Mavdil. The Ramban takes 2 paragraphs for this right at the beginning of the Torah, and then moves on. Did you know about this Ramban? It's right there. Even the Art Scroll has this Ramban in it.
Why is it like one of the very first arguments you hear from either Reform or the others is they disbelieve the creation is described? Why isn't immediately there's the response that you just said, or about what time was or what time is? I mean, it just seems like they look at like deer in the headlights.
So I'll give you the answer. 2 parts on it. It requires a bit of knowledge. And there's a lot of people today that know how to learn, but don't have a lot of knowledge. What I mean by that is the outside knowledge that's needed to fill in what is it the Gemara is saying. The Gemara says 25th of Adar or Elul. Gemara doesn't go into this whole explanation. It assumes you understand what it's saying. Obviously, time didn't start with how long were the 5 days. We're not interested, right? It takes an extra step. Most people today in our world are not college educated. Very few have a scientific background of any kind to come along to understand that the idea of time is relative, right? That time is a construct. It's a physical reality, not a spiritual reality. And because people run away from certain things, the more you learn, the less you run. I learned that from my father. My father used to say, science, the more you know science, he used to start his classes in organic chemistry. He said, imagine I have computer parts here. I have computer parts here. Don't ask me how they got manufactured, but they're not put together. How many times do I have to shake the bag for it to create a computer? And people would laugh. And working at it, finally someone would say, so Dr. Zimmerman, are you trying to say that there's a God? So then my father would say, no, what I'm trying to say is at the moment we get to these questions, like how do you have the rules of physics, the laws of physics? How do you have laws? Chance doesn't create laws. Somebody has to create laws, right? He said, we're leaving, as soon as we get to these questions, we're leaving science and we're getting into religion. And in this class, we only discuss science. To quote Rabbi Sachs in that great book that I tell everybody to read, right? The Great Partnership. Science, religion, and the search for, and the search for meaning. Science breaks things down to see how they work, but they can never tell you why it works. They can only tell you what's happening and think. Religion comes along and builds it back up to tell you the why. To give it me a perfect example. No, we're good. When my granddaughter got sick, by the Thursday, only her heart was losing. And they said, Friday night, they came to me as the grandfather. Maybe we should call the flock. And it was one of the few times in my life, maybe the only time I truly rose in faith. And I said, I'm an Orthodox, and we are Orthodox Jews. And that means we believe not just when things are going good, but things are also not going so good. Where there's life, there's hope. Where there's life, there's meaning. We're for life. Sunday, when we went to the tziyun of the Lubavitcher, and all of a sudden her brainwaves started moving. So we went from she's not going to live, she's going to be a vegetable. A week later, they went from she's going to be a vegetable, she's going to be not well. So I said at that point, 10 days in, we went from she's not going to live to a vegetable to now she's going to be somewhat functional, not what he called. So I said, in other words, you have no idea what's going on in the brain. And one of the doctors actually said, the truth is, we don't know the brain at all. The brain is God's playground. I never forget, in my Maimonides, the brain is God's playground. It's essentially this thing. See, nobody likes the idea that they're not really in control, that they're not driving the bus. You see, you want to know what it is all about? Everybody needs religion. Everybody needs to believe in something. It's part of the human condition. If you don't believe in God, all of a sudden, the Democrat or Republican becomes the religion. That becomes the religion. Right?
Religion, what they're talking about is science. Like
Right.
Fauci always says, science. You're fighting science. But
They actually use the word. Believe in the science. Yeah. Wait, we didn't even start. So there we go. And if both of your toes, you can join.
That's right. Make sure you say that prayer again for me. Then it goes like this and not like that.
So in other words, but I might want to make that point we just said. When it came to Dr. Fauci, what did it say? Believe in the science.
I believe what I say.
Put it in the gun. Put it into go cup. Yeah, put it in the go.
Yeah, he's
Just milk.
believe what I say.
In other words, believe in the science. Notice what he said. Don't say, don't know in the science. Now, what are the words that we say? Ani mamin be'emunah shalema. I believe with complete belief. Why don't we say, I know with complete knowledge? Because the truth of the matter is, every relationship is built on belief. I believe I can build a house with this person. I believe things will work out. Nobody knows anything. That's a great truth of life. Nobody knows what tomorrow will bring. But it's all tight anyway. So the point is, right? That is all the thing. Now let's go back to our mission. Now, my fathers. Here we go. The new parak right on top. Here we go. Mishtafach says, somebody who goes ahead and turns over his olives, he gets the process on the way, and then the Iroi Ovel, and then a period of mourning falls upon him. Again, like we said, actual mourning is only a diarais, is only while the dead body is in front of a person until that nighttime. But now in the rabbinic period, and I'm stressing that because it's going to come up in about a minute, in the rabbinic period of the morning, and therefore he's forbidden to work. Or now all of a sudden the Mishnah makes a sharp left turn. We start the Mishnah off with somebody became an ovel, and now it all of a sudden makes a left turn back into Chalamoid. It was he turned over his olives before the Yom Tov, and then before he could get to the press, something happened, and he couldn't press it before Yom Tov. Or the workers never showed up. He's allowed to load the beam onto them for the first time on Chalamoid, so they shouldn't get ruined, because you shouldn't have a hefsid maruba, a terrible loss. And then he leaves it until after the Yom Tov. He's not allowed to press it a second time. Tivi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef, he's allowed to pour the olives onto the press, finish the pressing out the oil, and seal the vats in the usual manner, because once you get started, you can keep right on going. So the Gemara asks our question, Posach Ba'evel, the Mishnah started off with the first line about being an Ovel, the Sayim B'Mayid, and then immediately makes a left turn and goes back to Yom Tov. So what's going on? We're on 11:2. So 11 says the Gemara, things that are allowed on Chalamoid is Surah Bimei Aveiloi. It's also in the days of one's morning. And this is a huge chiddush, because the days of Chalamoid are biblical. Who brings down about Chalamoy? The Torah does. It's biblical in nature. Avelis, as we said, is only rabbinical in nature. What is usually more stringent? Something that's biblical, and something that's rabbinical is more lenient. Says over here, Rav Shisha B'nai Derabaidi, switch it. Nonetheless, he said, because Chalamoyed is a Dioraisa, people are more careful about it. So they're careful not to do a strenuous work, and then if it's not a fiscal loss, they're not going to do it. Since mourning is rabbinical in nature, and once you bury the body, right, you need to move on, you might take it much more lenient.
It's true that the Talmud is an answer, but the Avelis, if you would go to work, it would show such a tremendous insensitivity to the very.
But that's what they're. No, not maybe. That's why they go on a Rabbanan and they're going more stricter. Because they recognize you should be sensitive. You should, first of all, what they're really saying is, we want you to express your grief. We do not want you to bottle up your grief. The 7 days are not for the dead. We should all this. Remember that it's for us. Unfortunately for us, it is for the mourners to get it out of their system. Okay? To get it out of their system. That knowledge, okay? That knowledge is exactly what you said, is the reason why they're doing that. Right? So now, Rav Ashi says the opposite. No, it's not necessary. You didn't have to tell me about Avelis, and of course you have to be strict about Avelis, like my father said. You didn't have to say that labor is allowed during the days of one's mourning. You're allowed to do something with the press. Midrabanan who do shari, because it's only rabbinical. Ella fila b'mayid, the isam malacha diaraisa, the prohibition of working just normally is biblical. In the case of a great financial loss, the Rabbanan allowed. So here he goes the opposite direction. He said an oval, of course, is allowed to work if there's a financial loss, because it's only rabbinic in nature. But even on Chalamoy, which is biblical in nature, if there's a financial loss, you're allowed to work. So now the Gemara says, Tanya Kabasi de Rav Shishim b'nei Rabbi. Rice is teaching according to Rav Shishim, the son of Rabbi. These are the things that another person is allowed to do for a mourner during his 7 days of Shiva. So Shimon is allowed to do for Reuben. He's allowed if he had turned over his olives, then others are allowed to load the beam onto them for the first time. And if his barrels need to be sealed, then you can go ahead and you can do it. Right? But if the wool needs to be raised from a dyer's vat, you can water the field, and when the watering time comes. So what do you see from here? This goes according to Rav Shishi Baraiti, that the Mishnah asks a mourner to press his olives even in the face of significant loss. You can only get somebody else to do it for you, but you yourself cannot do it. Rabbi Yehuda, stay near. You're even allowed to plow. You're allowed to plant a plow field for him. Besada and menace lepishtin, and a field that's designated for flax. If it's not sown immediately, it won't be able to be used in its proper time. Right? The timing is everything over here. So you're allowed to do it for them. We allow others to do it. 11b3. Amrulai, right? Says what Amrulai sages said to Rabbi Yehuda, no, that already is not good enough. Im loy tiza bebachir, tiza be'afel. If the plowed field will not be planted now, so you'll plant it in a later season. If he doesn't plant the flax, he'll plant something else. The point is, it's not a big enough loss that I'm going to allow you to use somebody else. I'm going to allow you to use somebody else to do it. Go ahead.
Because the other way, you get two crops. let's say a winter crop
Right, because if you the guy, yeah, but if the guy waits, maybe the next crop will be double the one before. I say, that's my solution.
Yeah, that's it. No, but so the question is very good. The answer to that question is because 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 we're looking for heterim. We're looking for heterim, a leniency. We only go by asher hu sham. I cannot make that cheshbon. I'm going to have now. I'm going to have later. I can only look at this moment in time. The first man the Omer says this moment in time is the time for planting. I can put it in. Rabbi Yehuda says at this moment in time, the reality is you're going to have some financial loss. You're not going to have a great financial loss. That's enough for me. Because at the end of the day, you shouldn't be allowed to do anything. Remember, you're not allowed to do anything. We're looking for a leniency that allows for something to happen during the days of Avelos. Once you do that, you limit it tremendously.
Not for every you says you can only put it down once.
That's it. Twice. Very good. That's exactly because otherwise, why couldn't you already do it twice? Right, exactly.
Once.
Right.
I want you to have a big loss.
Exactly. But a small loss, I can't worry about. Right. So now, which by the way, that's a very good point. Which is the reason why the Gemara, the Mishnahs and the Gemaras here have been doing something very strange. They've been taking things that aren't clearly black and white, that are very gray, and giving limits to them. Dafka, Daddy, because it's gray. Because it's subjective, they're saying, and because the reality is that we don't really want you doing any of this. Therefore, we're making it black and white. You're right, and that is not the normal way a Gemara works. A Gemara always says where you'll have different shiurim, right? This is always the thing about a tefach. One man's tefach, one guy could have a huge hand, one could have a small hand, right? The Gemara comes up with a basic number. It says because we don't do that. We're otherwise not gonna have structure. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Oimer, Seisav hafuchim ve'ein sham uman elohu. If an olives would turn over and there's nobody else but him around, he's the only skilled olive worker. It's time for the barrels to be sealed, and he's the only one who knows how to seal. His flax needs to be raised from the pool, but or his wool needs to be raised from the dyer's vat. He's allowed to work privately because you don't want it to look like you're taking mourning not seriously. Yes, sir. But if he was the only skilled worker serving the public, he's the barber or the bathhouse attendant for the public. The regel, and the time for the regel arrives, when the holidays arrives. The ain't sham uman elohu, and there's no other skilled worker but him. Harez who can even do it publicly because the public need overrides his thing. Now, I want to make something very clear. We're talking about before Yom Tif. On Yom Tif, and this is very important, everybody, we know that there is no Avelis on Yom Tif. Why not? The Gemara in Chagiga, which we're getting to, is going to tell you like this. The Asay of the Rabbin of the Mitzvah, Asay of the Rabbin of Simcha, the positive commandment of the public to be joyful on Yom Tif, is Doicha the Asay of the Yochid of Avelis. Pushes off the positive commandment of Avelis for the individual. Since every individual is part of the community at large, you're not your own self, you're part of the community. When the community has a mitzvah like Simcha, it overrides. So this is obviously talking beforehand, because otherwise there wouldn't be an Avelis anyway. So Chalamayid, there is no Avelis. So we're dealing with before Chalamayid. Ha'arisin b'chachrinin b'kavlonin. Sharecroppers, tenant farmers, and salaried field workers, which means they have a deal with the owner that their rent or whatever. Part of it goes to them and part of it goes to him. So if they don't work the field, not only are they losing, but who else is losing? The owner is losing. That you can't do. It's one thing to affect yourself. You cannot go ahead and affect somebody else. You can't be from on Enam's cheshbon. And that is, in other words, a person cannot sanctify something that does not belong to him. So in other words, you want to be so from. You go, oh, Reed Shapiro's house is I'm sanctifying it for the base of ignorance. No, it doesn't mean anything. Got it? Exactly. It's the same idea. Exactly. But those who are in the leasing business, those who lease cars, okay, in this case, donkeys, camels, or both, okay, they're not allowed to do it during their morning when they're in Avelis. That the leasing company has to shut down and it can't be done by somebody else because it's only a loss for them and it's not a big loss. It's not a big enough loss. But however, if the mourners or their animals or their cars were hired out to others to work for an extended period before they came, in other words, they're general contractors. They're 1099 people. Because we have an accountant in the room, my former boss, right? They're 1099s, they're independent contractors. Hare Elu Yasu, we're on 11 before, they're allowed to work because if they lose their full pay, because if they're not, they're going to lose their full pay and they're going to cause a loss to the guy who hired them. Schir Yoin, but somebody who's only hired for the day. In other words, you call up a temp thing, you're hiring the person by the hour. You hire them by the hour. Even in another city where nobody will know who the Ovel is, they won't know that he's in mourning. They won't know that he got a text. They won't know that he got a text that somebody passed away. Lo Yasi, he shall not continue his work. Why? Because he's still going to get paid up to the hours that he worked, right? And the effect that he's going to have on somebody else is not an effect because he's only been hired on an hourly basis. If he became a mourner, the work of others are in his hand. He was contracted to do it. Even though it was contracted on a piecework basis. In other words, there's no time constraint. It was open-ended to get it done. By Yasser, he shouldn't do it. He shouldn't do it. Right? He shouldn't do it. So it says Gemara, if there's no time constraint, of course. Piecework is like his own work. On the contrary, it should be prohibited. It's more likely to be prohibited than work done under a time constraint. Obviously, if I'm forced to get it done by the end of the week and now my morning, that's a I'll give you a perfect example is my wife had a baby, and the next day a certain boss called me in because they were short-handed and he had to be in two places at one time, and I had to take him over in one place, right? Because that's it. That's it. So, right? So, but that's the point. That's work. Because that's work. You got to step in. There's a time constraint. That's a reality. It's where there's no time constraint that you'd say, where there's no time constraint, of course you can't work. I'll work after the Avelis. What's the question? It says, Ella, Ema, baby, Kibula, Kibula, Lo Yasa, don't work. His work was already in the hands of him. They had already contracted to perform it for him. In other words, he subcontracted out. He subcontracted it out. He was hired and he subcontracted it out. The Beisai Lo Yasu, in his own house, they cannot do work. So this is an example. If a person is sitting Shiva and there is a contractor to fix over the kitchen, the contractor would have to stop. Because why? It looks like you hired them to work during this period of time. But if you bought another house for investment, you could have them continue to work there. Not a problem. Your garden in your front lawn could continue to go. That's correct. But it's inside your house that cannot be done. Miriam Berei the Rabban Umar Berei the Ravacha Berei the Rabba Habilayahu Gamla the Torah Ba'adi Adadi. They own a yoke of oxen. Each one owned one. Something unfortunate happened to Mar, the son of Rav Acha, the son of Rava, i.e., that somebody close to him passed away and he became a noble. Piska legalme, he went and he removed his ox from the yoke. So the ox from the yoke only had one ox, which means it was unusable. So Frank the Gemara Amar Rabashi the Gaber Rabba Kamar Bereda Ravacha Abarachi Mar did this. Granted, he's not concerned for his own financial laws. Wasn't he worried about Marion's, the other guy that now it can't be used and he's losing money? Says the Gemara about Tanam we learn that if they were hired out to others, they would perform the task. So in other words, not to avoid a financial loss, not only for themselves, but also for the other guy. You're now allowed to be frum on somebody else's places. After the Gemara, we're on 11b5. Who summer Adam Chashushani. Marba Rav Acha held that he was a prominent person. So the Ritva explains. In other words, either Marba Rav Ashi said, I'm a prominent and everybody's looking at me, so I got to remove my ox, but I have to pay my chaver, Mayan, for his loss, for his financial loss of the week. I could be frum on my places there, but I can't be frum on the others. That's one side of the Ritva. The Ritva flips around and says, on the contrary, the partner needs to know that he partnered with a special guy, with an Adam Chashuv. And that's part of the thing. You gain from being with an Adam Chashuv because people want to do business with an Adam Chashuv, but you lose when he's an Adam Chashuv, and there are things you can't do. So the Ritva says you can look at it one of two ways. If you want to see it, it's on the bottom, in the right-hand column, the art scroll, right on the bottom, or right over here, at number 40. Number 40, just the last paragraph, very fascinating. Okay, we are on today's daf. You pay something out.
You have to behave more strictly about yourself than anybody else. Even though, I remember when we lived in Washington Heights when he came to America.
Yeah, when you came.
There was a school nearby, and the road was in a small, whatever, I don't know where it was, but he came back with Lufthansa, a German Lufthansa, right. German Airlines. This is the 50s, that's not from the Holocaust. And to make it even worse, the plane, because of some delay, landed on Shabbos. And there was a little in a paper, there was some kind of teach newspaper. There was a little blurb where his name appeared, and the whole Kehillah was in up and down, and he was out of the job. He lost his job. So you see that on the road, you have to be more careful about what you do.
I'll give you an example.
You shouldn't have taken the German airline when it was only 10 years after the Holocaust.
Freundel, what happened with Freundel is one, and Rosenblatt. I mean, all these guys.
I'll give you an example. Rabbi Gibber. If you look at Rabbi Gibber, we are in Florida. It's hot most of the time. Not this morning. He always comes with a tie. That tie, no matter where he goes, is on. He won't come with a jacket, for an example, but he won't come with a jacket. Let's say to the golf tournament or whatever, right? But he shows up. Because, Daddy, you're always telling me I'm not rabbi, and that I'm only mistress anything. If you're going to play that game, you can't really have the time. There you go. So you can't have it. You can't have halfway anivus. If you're going to do this anivus, you got to go all the way. Ooh, that was a quick answer. Besides the point, to me, your daddy. Which leads us to the great line from Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam, in the later years, one of the Rabbanim, one of the younger Rabbanim in France, started exchanging the minhagim and arguing with Rashi. So Rabbeinu Tam wrote him a letter that if you change one more thing of Rashi, I'm throwing you into Chayra. And the Chayra Rabbeinu Tam was like, thing. So the Rav wrote back, how you talking? You argue with Rashi all the time, famously. Rabbeinu Tam. That's what he actually wrote those words. He wrote back. He is my grandfather. I can argue with him. For you, he's Rabbeinu, the Shlomo Yitzchaki. You can't touch him. So, Daddy, for everybody else, you're rabbis in it. For me, you're Daddy. There you go. There you go. So there's them. So, right. So, but that is that example of Rabbi Gibber is a perfect example, especially in a community like ours that's very eclectic, that has from one end of the spectrum to the other spectrum of Orthodox Jewry. And that universal respect that he gets is based upon that understanding that he's honorable, he's straight, but he has an ahava for everybody, but he's the Rav, and we are his congregants. And that line is never crossed. And that tie helps keep that line in one place.
Our generation was dressed for success.
Right.
And the way you dress, a teacher, or whatever it is, that commands it automatically.
People don't.
I wear a tie.
We were, we started with, you made me wear a tie.
Always give me, dressed like
To kill. Yeah.
If other professors came with their dirty dungarees or the ripped, where their knees are showing, I saw the even the Goyish student get respect.
I can tell you this, when I started working, 1991, by Zelenet, you came in with a tie. You came in with a suit. You didn't, or you wore a sports jacket. I remember you were a sports jacket and all that. You were representing a firm. By definition, you had to do it. And we were a small firm. We started out in a basement by his father-in-law. It didn't matter, right? The point was.
When I was chairman of this department,
right,
and we were hiring, there was one guy came. He had a very good credential. He was a BJC Columbia. He had written many years, but he came in like a schlep, with a dungaree, t-shirt. He come for the interview.
Have respect for the people you're coming for.
So I said right away, I said, I'm hiring this guy. If he has no respect for us to come in, dress.
And you know where you see it? We are Orthodox Jews. Theoretically, we should not be interested, spend a lot of time on clothing. It is amazing, and which we're coming up to it in about a month and a half when we get into Vayikra. Look how much time the Torah spends on begodim. And it goes, beget. The uniform. I spoke about this, I think, last year. The Torah is coming to tell you, it's not enough to do the avodah, the service. It's not what you do. It's also how you do it. Why is it that a kohen bal mum, a kohen that has a blemish, is not allowed to do the avodah? He's a full-fledged kohen. He gets truma. He's allowed to do everything. One thing he's not allowed to do is avodah. Why? Not because there's anything inherently wrong with him. Hashem told Moshe, who created everybody? I did. If I created them, they're perfect. They're exactly the way they're supposed to be. The answer is because people are shallow. People read a book by its cover. God's perception is greater than reality. And therefore, how you look is as important as the avodah. Okay, but it could do everything else. The problem is not with the kohen. The problem is with us, with the Gila. We are going to, the Gemara says, because we're going to look. We're going to look. The problem is with us. We're shallow. Davis is not shallow. He created him. This guy's perfect the way he is, and it's tremendously so. So now let's keep going over here. Okay, we're going to go probably. Yeah. We're going to get to the Mishnah. We're going to try to get to the Mishnah on the other side, but okay. Let's start again. Amishmuel. If you hired Goyim to do work, you hired contractors to complete a specific project, and Shabbos comes along, can they work on Shabbos or not? Here's the rule. If it's in the city of the Tchum of a Jewish city, it's forbidden because people are going to assume that you hired them on the Shabbos itself. If it's outside, you're allowed to because you didn't tell them to work on Shabbos. You just told them to get the project done. New, so there's nothing inherently wrong. The problem here is Maris Ayin, how it's going to look. So again, by the letter of the law, no problem. But by how it's going to look, people are going to say you hired them to work on Shabbos. No good. Even outside the Chum, there's no other Jewish cities close to that place. It's also not allowed. And even when there's no Jewish city close by, this is only said by Shabbos Yom Tovim, because it's not common for people to go there because it's outside of the Tichum. So, and people are not hopping in their cars and driving. When people go on road trips, but if where it's common for people to go there, it's also to do it. What? Because there's no tchum and people move. Once non-Jewish, in other words, non-Jewish contractors built a house for Mazutra, and they built it outside. It was outside of the tchum. It was let's say in Sunny Isles, okay, out over there, about 20 minutes up the road, right? Ikla Rab Sapra Rav Huna Bachanina. And it happened on Shabbos. Rav Sapra Rav Huna came to visit, but they wouldn't enter the house because it was built on Shabbos. And in fact, Mazutra wouldn't enter because it was built on Shabbos. I just want to say this. The Tosfos is not here, but there is a remarkably famous Tosfos that Rabbeinu Tam was building a shul in Ramamut, and he allowed the contractors to continue building it even on Shabbos.